Oh, I wish you could see what I'm seeing. There's lights. I now know what it feels to be a rock star. Alofa, welcome, dear friends. What a beautiful devotion and what a beautiful interlude. Really, we feel so embraced by the friends in Calgary and so loved and so taken care of. So thank you to the dear friends. Friends, welcome to our second evening plenary. My name is Mariam Ashtiani, and on behalf of the Executive Committee of the Association for Baha'i Studies, we're so happy to be with you again. As was mentioned last night by my dear colleague Shabnam, the work of ABS over the last 12 years has really been shaped by the 2013 guidance from the Universal House of Justice, which has given focus to the ABS to foster spaces and processes of learning around participating in the discourses of society. And today, I'm sure many of you were able to partake in the fruits of so much of the learning that's been going on. As we are also aware, participating in the discourses of society is only one of the ways in which the Baha'is and their friends around the world are striving to transform society. They're also engaged in two other interrelated areas of endeavor, the community building process and social action. And as we do this work around the world, we've been asked to strive to achieve progressively higher and higher degrees of coherence, both within these areas of endeavor, but also among these three broad interconnected fields of endeavor. Where, for example, the knowledge that we're generating in the field of social action or in the community building process is complementary, integrated, and mutually supportive of our contributions to discourse. And so these areas, the knowledge generated in these areas, is mutually reinforcing the others. And many, again, were shown today. And tonight's panel is a very beautiful illustration of just that, this interconnected nature of these areas of endeavor. We have the true privilege of hearing from the co-authors of the book, Weaving a Fabric of Unity, Conversations on Education and Development. And the panelists will reflect on 50 years of experience in the pioneering enterprise that came to be identified as FUNDAEC. They will be highlighting its unique conceptual and methodological approach and exploring FUNDAEC's contribution to intellectual life and social action in communities around the world. So I would like to welcome tonight's panelists, and they will be moderated by Michael Karlberg. So I will welcome them up, and Michael will introduce to us our three panelists. Please help me in welcoming them.
So friends, we have a really special gift tonight. And it's such a pleasure to be able to welcome to the plenary stage Gustavo Correa, Haleh Arbab, and Bradley Wilson, who, as you heard from Miriam, are going to share with us insights gleaned from a social and economic development effort most of us know by the acronym FUNDAEC. As many of you know, FUNDAEC developed a framework for community-engaged knowledge generation and a corresponding pedagogy that are probably without parallel in the development field. They are really at the frontiers of learning in our own community and really at the frontiers of humanities learning about what this means. And the ripple effects of this pioneering work can already be seen unfolding on multiple continents today. So it really is a pleasure to welcome to the stage, first, two individuals who have been associated with FUNDAEC's work for many, many years, Gustavo Correa and Haleh Arbab, but also to welcome Bradley Wilson. I came to know Bradley about a decade ago when we began working on some projects together. And around that time, Bradley was laying the groundwork for his Center for Resilient Communities in the Appalachian region in the United States. And that center has since emerged as a leading North American site of community-engaged knowledge generation, and it embodies many of the same principles and approaches that had been pioneered by FUNDAEC. So, not surprisingly, Bradley became a natural collaborator with Gustavo Correa and Haleh Arbab, and one of the many fruits of that collaboration is this book, Weaving a Fabric of Unity, that we're going to hear insights from tonight. So just to underscore, how does this relate to the work of the association? You know, we come together in this association to develop our capacities to contribute to the advancement of the academic and professional discourses we participate in. The insights we're going to glean tonight from this panel emerged at the intersection of social action and discourse. On one level, FUNDAEC has fostered at the grassroots a distinctive and empowering discourse on social action. But on another level, the knowledge generated by FUNDAEC's efforts has contributed to the advancement of corresponding academic and professional discourses. And let me just illustrate this with one really profound example. You know, in the first few decades of the development field, religion was widely viewed as an obstacle to development. But by the early 1990s, due largely to the relative failure of so many development efforts up to that date, some development thinkers began to recognize the field had to take seriously the role of religion in development. And in response, Canada's own International Development Research Centre convened a dialogue among influential development practitioners who drew on religious inspiration explicitly. One of those was Dr. Farzam Arbab, one of the founding members of FUNDAEC. The fruit of that dialogue was a publication titled The Lab, the Temple, and the Market, which contains a chapter by Dr. Arbab that is widely read today. I'm sure some of you have read it. That experience partly inspired a series of subsequent discourses on science, religion, and development that unfolded on 3 continents. So this is only one example of a contribution FUNDAEC has made to the advancement of thought in a field. And similarly, Bradley Wilson's Center for Resilient Communities, which is housed at the University of West Virginia, is making numerous contributions to related professional and academic discourses, and Bradley's raising up a generation of graduate students who will be making further contributions. So in all of these endeavors, we see clearly the way insights from the field of social action can contribute coherently to the advancement of professional and academic discourse. Now, our evening is going to unfold in this way. We're going to watch a very brief 5-minute video clip. So hopefully whoever is going to cue that will be ready in a moment, which will give us some of the texture and the spirit and the sort of a glimpse into the living expression of the work that FUNDAEC has been doing in the voices of many of the participants who have come up through those programs. It will help bring to life then the comments that will follow. And we'll just go straight from that short video Gustavo Correa will then share some comments, followed immediately by Haleh Arbab, followed immediately by Bradley Wilson, and I'll just offer a couple of closing words at the end. So whoever is behind the video, you can push the button now.
FUNDAEC para mí fue lo máximo que pudo haber pasado en mi vida. Yo llegué en mayo del 74. Tanta fue la emoción que yo llegué a mi casa y le dije a mamá, mamá, me voy a estudiar, porque yo eso era lo que quería. Entonces mi mamá me dijo, ¿a dónde? Le dije, en La Roblea, con un colegio que se llama FUNDAEC. Y mi mamá me dijo, ¿y cuándo le toca? Y se le dije, me voy ya. ¿Cómo así? Y me llevo el niño para que usted no tenga peso. Yo le había dicho a Gustavo que yo tenía un niño y me dijo, no importa, hágale. En ese entonces casi no había transporte y alisté la maleta y me fui a pie. Llegué por la noche con mi hijito y mi maleta. Y el otro día vino para el salón, me presenté y arrancamos.
Una de las cosas que realmente más me impresionó el primer día que llegué al salón de clase FUNDAEC fue cuando miré a los lados y entonces vi que realmente era nuestra misma gente, los campesinos del norte del Cauca, y vi a ese señor ahí parado, el doctor Arbab, ahí mirándonos y tratando de enseñarnos realmente cómo podíamos nosotros mismos desarrollar todo ese potencial para poder ser capaces de gestionar el desarrollo de nuestras comunidades.
Cuando los ingenieros, entre ellos pues mi papá y mi mamá, entraron en ese grupo, aquí en Alegría la gente no tenía la mentalidad de educarse profesionalmente, porque la vocación de todo el mundo era agrícola. Y las mujeres pues ya tenían su rol así como bien definido de ser madres y también agricultoras ahí alrededor de la casa y todo. Entonces cuando llegan estos ingenieros y se forman, entonces sí se ve la brecha grande, ¿no? Entre ellos, su mentalidad y las cosas que quieren hacer y empiezan a hacer y las generaciones anteriores.
La educación es el poder para nosotros. A veces pues, se nos menosprecia como personas del campo, pero tenemos todas las capacidades de aprender y de ser responsables.
FUNDAEC significa demasiada luz, como esa esperanza. O sea, yo le llamaría, no sé, enhorabuena. Siempre, siempre como que ha estado ahí apoyándonos, como una persona como abrazadora que siempre nos ha acogido, a pesar de donde vengamos, las situaciones que estemos pasando, siempre como ha tenido esa voluntad y esa fuerza para ayudar nosotros a la juventud y también a las personas mayores. Entonces, vivo muy agradecida con FUNDAEC por eso. Así que muchas gracias, FUNDAEC.
Aquí tenemos un par de mandarinas. Aquí tenemos el cacao, la yuca. Esta es una clase de banano. Al menos lo que enseñó FUNDAEC lo colocaba en práctica. Esta es parte de la herencia de FUNDAEC.
O sea, el escepticismo siempre está cuando no se ven los resultados. También hay que educarnos para entender que los grandes procesos no es que hoy sembramos un árbol y al año ya el ambiente se transformó. No, somos solo el peldaño. La escalera es muy, muy alta, pero si no nos convertimos en esos peldaños, ¿cómo vamos a llegar un día a nuestra meta? Y cosas maravillosas pueden darse en el mundo porque hay que ser ambiciosos.
Para mí FUNDAEC fue la mejor escuela, la mejor universidad. Los mejores momentos los pasé aquí.
Good evening, dear friends. I would like to begin by thanking the organizers of this event for inviting us, Haleh and Bradley and myself, to share some reflections from the book Weaving the Fabric of Unity, recently published to commemorate 50 years of FUNDAEC's work in the field of education and development. For those who may not be familiar with it, FUNDAEC stands for Foundation for the Teaching and Application of Sciences. Although the term Baha'i-inspired organization had not yet entered the Baha'i vocabulary when it was founded in 1974, today FUNDAEC will certainly be recognized as such. I hope that what I will share today will be value to you and to all those who, beginning in their own communities, are striving to build a better world, inspired and guided by the teaching of the revelation of Baha'u'llah. The book was written with the desire to preserve certain defining moments, insights, and the principles that have guided FUNDAEC throughout its existence, principles that have enabled it to transcend the typical life cycle of organization of this kind. But perhaps even more important than the milestones themselves are the motivation that led the group of Baha'is in Colombia in 1970 to begin working with the population of Norte de Cauca, a rural region where today one of the first local Baha'i houses of worship serves as its spiritual center. The story dates to 1974, when a group of professors at the Universidad del Valle in Cali, Colombia, led by Farsam Arbab, a prominent physicist, chose to embark on a path that many consider unconventional. Farsam has put a promising scientific career on hold to come to Colombia as a pioneer during the first 9-year plan and to help establish the doctoral program in theoretical physics. Once in Colombia, he decided to combine his academic work with other activities that were entirely new to him. The 1970s were a time of intense questioning within Colombian universities of the prevailing development models. At the same time, a rapid expansion of the faith was taking place. The contact with rural communities allows those of us involved in the teaching work to observe firsthand the difficult conditions faced by rural populations who were suffering the consequences of industrialization process. Small farms were being overtaken by vast monocultures of sugarcane. Families were being displaced. Landscapes once rich in forests and biodiversity were disappearing. And the social fabric, once grounded in extended family networks and tradition of mutual support, was slowly coming undone. It was in this context that Farsam managed to bring together a group of colleagues, including myself, then just beginning my career as a professor. We began to reflect on how science could be put in the service of a more humane and sustainable kind of development, a form of development that, in addition to addressing the material needs, would also consider the spiritual dimension of the human being and the growing concern for the protection of the environment. Words of Baha'u'llah, such as "be anxiously concerned with the needs of the age you live in, and center your deliberation on its exigencies and requirements," awaken in us a profound sense of duty and commitment. The Norte de Cauca region was chosen as the starting point for action. This region, largely inhabited by Afro-Colombian and indigenous population, was undergoing a process of forced displacement toward urban centers, while the lands of small-scale farmers were being absorbed by large monoculture sugarcane plantations. The reflections and actions undertaken were guided by two fundamental pillars: scientific knowledge on one hand, and the truths and principles contained in the revelation of Baha'u'llah on the other. Although most members of the group were not declared Baha'is, over time they came to internalize the faith principles that gradually became the foundation of the institutional culture and the light that guided and brought coherence to their actions. Soon, the group reached several points of agreement on fundamental concepts that would shape the conceptual framework guiding their efforts in decades to come. That development could not be something imposed from outside. It had to emerge from the aspirations, insights, and participation of the people themselves. Second, that the participation required individuals to gain access not only to technical solutions, but to scientific knowledge and the capacity to think for themselves. And that true participation required individuals to gain not only to, and third, that integration would be a defining feature of all their endeavors, overcoming false divides between science and religion, between theory and practice, and across academic disciplines. With this in mind, one of the most significant actions of FUNDAEC history was undertaken: to provide ever-growing number of people with access to both spiritual and scientific knowledge, enable them to participate meaningfully in the generation of knowledge for the transformation of their own communities. Rosa, that you saw in the video, was part of that very first group. The first group of 35 youth from Norte de Cauca opened the path to south and more to follow. The role of these promoters in community well-being was understood as a source of honor and distinction, but also of purpose and spiritual fulfillment. Years later, it has been deeply moving to hear many of them, now professionals in diverse fields, reflect on how service became a central part of their education and a defining aspect of who they are. In the words of Abdul Baha, is any larger bounty conceivable than this, that an individual looking within himself should find that by the confirming grace of God, he has become the cause of peace and well-being, of happiness and advantage to his fellow men? In parallel, the group these new protagonists carried out, in parallel, the group of these reduced new protagonists carried out participatory research on alternative local systems of production, appropriate technology, agroindustry, credit systems, and community organization. A set of educational texts began to take shape, designed to build capacities in different areas: mathematics, science, technology, and language, all centered around the concept of service. The educational texts that were produced, 70 in total at that time, and continue to be developed over the years, represent the systematization of these findings from those initial investigations, as well as from subsequent efforts to explore other aspects of the population's life processes. These educational materials gradually form a full curriculum, which was eventually recognized by the Colombian Ministry of Education as an innovation in rural education. Years later, the same curriculum was adopted as the official one for rural schools in Honduras. These texts are more than just instructional materials. They are a record of the process of learning and reflection that help entire communities move forward. They invite students to view reality as an integrated whole, material and spiritual, rooted in the oneness of humankind. The content are presented, for the most part, as an exploratory dialogue between the author and the students. This dialogue is not merely about conveying information, rather, it aims to deepen the students' understanding of a series of interconnected concepts. All of this unfolds within a context of a purposeful and moderately complex activity that, beyond conceptual understanding, also calls for the acquisition of information as well as the development of skills and abilities. It is a continual exploration of reality carried out with the attitudes and ethics of a socially committed scientist. This integrative approach enables connections between the spiritual and the material, science and religion, the abstract and the concrete, and the theory and practice. For example, to develop the capacity to become a producer of healthy food, it's not enough to know what type of soil and climate are suitable for a given crop, or to possess the necessary skills of soil preparation, planting, and crop care. It is also essential to understand the biological life of the soil and the countless other interactions that occur within the ecosystem that affect the crop. Furthermore, the student must develop a sense of responsibility for producing healthy food and value the service being offered to the society. A careful explanation of the reasons, examination of the reasons why the text developed by FUNDAEC in this period and others foster deep learning and personal transformation reveals that the pedagogy, the content, and the mode of presentation are not only scientifically sound, but also influenced with the power that comes from the spiritual truth which inspire those who created them. Systematizing the knowledge generated in diverse settings into educational texts continues to be one of FUNDAEC's distinctive contributions, often carried out in collaboration with others. These and other texts developed by FUNDAEC are being widely used and are the core of many other educational initiatives as well. A distinguishing feature of the stages that follow was a collaboration with other organizations pursuing similar goals. Nearly 40 entities, public and private, with a range of ideologies, approached FUNDAEC to form partnerships. It was a time of learning how to work along others, identifying common ground, and respecting differences without compromising the integrity of what has been achieved. What began as a small initiative with just 35 students in Norte de Cauca gradually evolved into what became known as the tutorial learning system, a decentralized educational model now recognized in many settings as one of the most promising alternatives of rural education. As the result became increasingly compelling, government support also grew, eventually contributing to the formulation of national policy on rural education. During this period, the lives of thousands of young people living in vulnerable conditions were transformed. Over time, the program came to be known as the Preparation of Social Action that was adopted by various Baha'i-inspired organizations across Africa, the Pacific, and Latin America. The way of working with others, of maintaining unity among all involved while promoting collective learning, is worth highlighting. It was inspired in many ways in the lessons the Baha'i community has learned in developing its administrative order. Over the years, the strength of the fabric of unity woven among students, tutors, and institutions proved vital in responding to various challenges, the most recent being the food scarcity brought on by the pandemic. As the crisis deepened, a series of virtual gatherings were held to consult on the most urgent needs. One priority quickly emerged, and it was food production. In response, FUNDAEC quickly organized virtual courses that led to the creation of 800 family gardens across the country. At the same time, a nationwide campaign was launched to plant trees and lay the foundation for the food forest. These efforts quickly took root in areas where promoters of community well-being had already been trained, and they flourished. The movement revealed the depth and resilience of the social fabric that has been carefully built over the years. It called for action on a larger scale, which led to the birth of a new initiative, the Growing Hope Program. This initiative now supports communities as they transition from conventional to regenerative models of agriculture, models that protect the biological life of the soil, promote biodiversity, minimize or eliminate tillage, rely on organic fertilizers and local seeds, and strengthen short food supply chains. Regenerative agriculture has also become a major focus for FUNDAEC in the years ahead. There is no time to continue saying some other things about the history of FUNDAEC, but after FUNDAEC reaches the 50 years, so many wonder whether it has fulfilled its original goals. And in some respect, one can say yes. Many projects have been completed, and significant stages of thought and strategy have evolved. But the significance of FUNDAEC lies in something far deeper. To grasp this, we can turn to a metaphor used by Baha'u'llah to describe the power of education, one that many of you are familiar with. Man is the supreme talisman. Lack of proper education has, however, deprived him of which he does inherently possess. Through a word proceeding out of the mouth of God, he has called into being. By one word more, he was guided to recognize the source of his education. By yet another word, his station and destiny were safeguarded. The great being said, regard man as a mine rich in gems of inestimable value. Education can alone cause it to reveal its treasures and enable mankind to benefit therefrom. From the very beginning, the Baha'i community has sought to do this to assist thousands of individuals in discovering who they truly are and why they are capable of becoming, by sharing with them the teachings of Baha'u'llah. It has helped them see that they are indeed the supreme talisman, endowed with limitless possible potential, but that realizing this potential requires a proper education. How painful is to witness the countless souls who have not yet encountered this truth, and how many communities remain unable to benefit from the vast potential that lies hidden within their own members. Through the Institute process, growing number of individuals are polishing the gems within, and as they do, their communities around them begin to benefit from their insights, talents, and capacities. Vibrant communities, as you know, are emerging in every corner of the globe. But organizations like FUNDAEC and others that are emerging are working alongside these individuals, people trained with the Institute process, helping them discover new gems that can bring material and spiritual prosperity to their families and communities. To me, this is one of the FUNDAEC's most meaningful accomplishments, especially now that I can observe it from the distance. It has developed educational materials, tools, and programs that open the door of thousands of young people from all walks of life and beliefs to fully develop their God-given potential and place it to the service of society. To walk this path is not only to join without fear and in a spirit of unity the ranks of those around the world striving to build a new civilization, but also to help others recognize their capacity to do the same, to invite them into a movement that is quietly, steadily gaining strength.
It is a true honor for me to participate in this conference and to share some reflections on the work of FUNDAEC. I hope to explore how FUNDAEC's efforts align with the Baha'i community's broader contributions to the advancement of civilization, and to, in particular, highlight the significance of its approach, how it translates principles into concrete action in ways that may be of value to others on similar paths of learning and service. By approach, I mean a coherent set of concepts, methods, and attitudes that guide action, respecting local realities, building capacity within populations, and promoting learning through action and reflection. It is not just what is done, but how knowledge is generated, how relationships are nurtured, how individuals and institutions advance together with unity and clarity of purpose. Each of us here shares the aspiration to contribute to a civilization that harmonizes spiritual and material progress, and to work toward the realization of the oneness of humankind. We hope to glimpse, however modestly, a new civilization shaped by this unifying principle. The Baha'i community has long pursued a mode of learning guided by the Universal House of Justice, seeking insight through action across various fields. FUNDAEC is one of such initiatives, exploring social action through the application of spiritual and scientific principles to improve lives. It began with a small group seeking an approach to development that would empower communities to take charge of their advancement. Guided by the principle of consultation, they asked foundational questions: how to interpret social reality, what tools to use, how to measure progress, and systematize learning. Through persistent action and reflection, the group gradually shaped an evolving approach, one that can offer insights to others committed to transformative change. Over time, others, myself included, joined the process, drawn by the spirit of learning and the desire to contribute. As we confronted key questions, we examined established models. One was the diagnostic model, adapted from medicine. An expert diagnoses a problem and prescribes a remedy. This model continues to influence development and education. Even when made more participatory by involving community members in identifying needs or implementing plans, it often preserves the basic dynamic. One party diagnoses and the other receives. We also looked at the engineering model, where every step, resource, and variable is carefully calculated in advance. This approach is effective when tasks are clearly defined and predictable, but it struggles in human systems where behavior, motivation, and cultural meaning cannot be reduced to inputs and outputs. Then there's operational research, used when goals are clear, but the path forward is uncertain. A classic example is the Apollo program, landing human on the moon. The laws of physics were known, the destination defined, but the means required exploration and experimentation. This model has influenced fields like business, logistics, and innovation. Yet none of these frameworks met our needs. We were not attempting to prescribe solutions from outside or to engineer social change, nor was our task like sending rockets to the moon, guided by physical laws and technical precision. We are trying to understand communities on their own terms. People are not problems to be fixed. They have agency. They reflect, choose, and aspire. Our values and long-term vision were clear, grounded in spiritual principles, but the path needed to emerge organically through participation, action, and ongoing learning. The metaphor that best expressed this ethos was that of a gardener. A gardener doesn't decide how a plant grows. Instead, they observe, learn from patterns, and cultivate an environment where growth can occur. The metaphor reflects an approach rooted in continual action, research, consultation, and reflection, permeated by a culture of learning. Let me share how this comes to life through a colleague's account of an initiative with school teachers and administrators. The goal was to sustain agricultural and environmental projects through action and research, not as a one-off activity, but as a continuous learning process. So this is the account. He says, it began with a meeting with the school's principal. We explained that we weren't there to impose a plan. We simply wanted to accompany the school in pursuing its own vision. The principal welcomed the invitation, and we made an initial visit. We observed quietly, checking whether there was land for planting, how the cafeteria functioned, how the meals were prepared. We gathered basic information, the number of students, the structure of food programs, and the logistical realities. After this visit, our team met to reflect. One major question emerged. How did the National School Meal Program operate? Where did the food come from? What impact did it have on nutrition and learning? These discussions reinforced something vital. The school needed to set its own direction. We could accompany, share tours, and offer support, but not lead. We brought 2 educational texts that helped establish shared language and purpose, rooted in FUNDAEC's framework. The teachers studied deeply, and soon a vision emerged, reviving the school garden while involving families. They noted that school meals were often repetitive, with missing or spoiled fruits and vegetables. They envisioned a system where students and families could grow produce locally to improve nutrition. They also wanted to plant fruit trees, not only for food, but to create shade and beauty. Their plan included building 6 garden beds involving the community and organizing workshops, not to lecture, but to spark dialogue on nutrition and well-being. They set a rhythm of work, daily activity, with bi-weekly pauses for consultation and study. We invited technical trainers, and soon 256 grafted fruit trees were planted. This primary school had 76 students and 8 teachers. Nearly every family participated. Then came a surprise. The national government issued a call for school proposals. Out of 10,000 applications, only 700 were selected, and this school was among them. Their proposal, grounded in the text they had studied, earned them 15 million pesos. They came to us with renewed confidence. We're going to run our own school store and make improvements. They adapted as they progressed. Families shifted from short-term thinking to sustainable practices. None had written a proposal before, so we practiced using the forms and met with each parent individually. This process became training in itself. Supplies were purchased and distributed. What began as a modest project around healthy eating became a transformative experience for the entire school community. The power of this example lies not in perfection, but in demonstrating what happens when reflection, consultation, and action become part of daily life, when education becomes a shared endeavor rooted in the community's own agency. Let me now turn briefly to a region I recently visited, Córdoba and Sucre, on Colombia's northern coast. There, 61 PSA groups operate, involving 630 youth. These young people study FUNDAEC's materials alongside texts from Ruhi Institute, while engaging in community service. Some have initiated productive projects to support their families. The tutors accompanying these groups are extraordinary, resilient, thoughtful, and committed. Many are young women, often mothers, who walk long distances in difficult conditions. Their service goes far beyond instruction. They see themselves as partners in transformation. They work in communities affected by environmental degradation. Dams have disrupted national flows, flooding is common, and fishing has declined. Yet they persist, cultivating spaces of learning, service, and hope. This brings me to a broader reflection. One aim of this conference is to explore how principles inspired by Baha'i faith engage with other thought traditions. In this spirit, the relationship between FUNDAEC's approach and the work of Orlando Falsborda is worth noting. Falsborda, a pioneering Colombian sociologist, helped transform the social sciences in Latin America through participatory action research. Remarkably, when FUNDAEC was taking shape in Norte del Cauca, Falsborda was conducting research in Colombia's north coast, the same region where FUNDAEC would later take root. It's unclear how widely known his legacy is among rural youth today. Many are too young to have read his work, yet through PSA, they are perhaps unknowingly carrying forward many of his insights, valuing local culture, building capacity, and advancing change from the grassroots. Falsborda sought to amplify campesino voices, often through Marxist frameworks. FUNDAEC extends this legacy through a spiritual lens, seeing individuals and communities as principled protagonists of transformation. At the same time, it consciously builds scientific capacity. Participants are taught to think like scientists, to observe, analyze, question, and learn systematically. While deeply valuing traditional knowledge, FUNDAEC also affirms the importance of modern scientific advancement and intentionally puts students in contact with the evolving body of knowledge. In doing so, it nurtures youth who are capable of engaging both with their cultural heritage and the frontiers of human understanding, bridging local insights with global progress. Through PSA, youth study math, science, and language, while also developing moral leadership, social responsibility, and the ability to serve their communities. Education is redefined not only as academic preparation, but as empowerment and capacity building. During my visit, I asked a group of PSA students what a culture of learning meant to them. The responses were deeply moving. One said, consultation is essential to learning. It's become part of our daily life, not separate or formal, but how we live with neighbors. Another shared, learning isn't about money, it's something communal. It happens in conversations with others and with myself. A third said, farmers may not use academic language, but their knowledge runs deep. That's what a culture of learning means, when we're ready to learn from each other and share without expecting anything in return. And finally, even when I'm alone, I reflect. I ask myself, how have I lived? What have I done? Those quiet conversations are part of learning too. These voices remind us that the culture of learning is not just a framework. It is a way of being rooted in humility, mutual respect, and the shared search for truth. It continues to take root in classrooms, communities, and hearts, shaping how we learn, serve, and build together.
Thank you very much to the ABS Executive Committee for inviting us. Thank you, Michael, for your opening remarks. Haleh and Gustavo, it's been such a joy to work with you on this project, and it's hard to believe it's been just 2 years since we envisioned putting this book together. And here it is. We've presented this work in a number of different venues. But in some respects, we wrote it with this next generation in mind, and the ABS seems like one of the most appropriate places to share some of the results of this endeavor. We wrote this book particularly for those who have served FUNDAEC, but also for scholars and development practitioners seeking to contribute to the intellectual life of their communities and to the transformation of society. FUNDAEC's experience over these 50 years offer valuable insights into the field of development, participatory research, grassroots education, and the translation of Baha'i ideals into practical contexts. I think that FUNDAEC provides a glimpse of what it means to release the society-building power of the faith in ever greater measure. But more than that, in this book, it offers an intimate portrait, what Gustavo has called a living narrative of an institution in motion. FUNDAEC is not presented in Weaving a Fabric of Unity as a finished product, but as a process shaped by people, principles, context, decisions, and setbacks. Reading this book is like watching a fabric being woven, not just admiring the final design, but seeing the threads come together, the frayed edges, and the gradual articulation of form. This was very intentional. This kind of texture matters for those of us around the world also striving to advance research and education rooted in place-based processes of community building, social action, and the participation in the discourses of society. And FUNDAEC is one of our really crucial beacons. Of course, Weaving Fabric of Unity is a story about an institution, but it also offers blueprints for a new kind of intellectual work, one that defies conventional categories of scholarship or development practice. FUNDAEC offers us and invites us into a different way of thinking about knowledge, education, and social action. So with the time that I have, I'd just like to share 3 elements of my experience in composing this book in conversation with Haleh and Gustavo for this particular audience. And I'd like to speak about 3 things: rethinking scholarly practice and what it means to be a scholar, our commitment to particular places, and lastly, dedication. And it's this last one that I hope you'll really stick in for, because I think it's the most important. I'll just reflect on the fact that Gustavo, 50 years ago, was 24 years old. How many people here are younger than 24 in the room? Can you put your hands in the air? Many in their 20s? I was asked a number of years ago to describe people who I admired in my field of scholarship, people who I might want to emulate, people who are exemplary. And it was a really challenging thing. And I'm sure for many in the room, we look out and we think about who we would look to, who we might aspire to try to live up to their example in our own careers. And I did think of three people. I thought of Farzam Arbab. Farzam also had pursued his PhD, particle physics. And I asked this question of myself, how did he end up in Colombia? What was it that drove him there? And to establish this kind of institution with a group of other young people. I thought of Gustavo Correa, who left a career, a very promising career in mathematics, to build and be one of the first leaders of FUNDAEC, and for the next 30 years of his life would dedicate himself to that. Or Haleh was another, Haleh Arbab, someone who could have had a career in literature, probably been one of the great writers of our time, and in fact, in posterity may be considered such in that she helped to author so many of the texts of PSA, SAT, and numerous others. So one asks themselves, well, why did they choose this path? And I think that requires us to rethink our scholarly practice. What we learn from FUNDAEC is that the dichotomies often taken for granted in academic life between disciplines or between our profession as teachers or as researchers or doing service or administration can lead not to clarity in our minds, but to fragmentation. Fragmentation of our institutions, our roles, and ultimately our minds. Universities often appear to be sites of integrative thinking, with diverse fields and expansive catalogs, with opportunities to teach, or to do research, or to render service. And while this diversity enables specialization and advancement, we also know that from within, those of us training in a university setting or working in universities, that it often comes at the cost of coherence and wider understanding. We experience how research or teaching or service are valued unequally, how disciplines are ranked and resourced differently, how our time is chopped up and horizons reduced, and how we are evaluated by narrow competitive metrics that miss the big picture, the whole. FUNDAEC challenges us to see differently the role of the scholar. It reminds us that the most important capabilities we must cultivate, individually and collectively, do not fit into neat academic silos, but require integration. These aren't competencies in physics or economics or literature, but integrated capabilities. The ability to study and investigate reality, to teach and accompany others, to serve communities, and to reorganize institutions to meet the needs of the age and the region in which they are embedded. These capabilities are not aspects of a career. They are the foundation of a meaningful life of service as scholars and as practitioners of development and as protagonists of social action. I want to highlight FUNDAEC's deeper invitation to reimagine who we are as scholars, who we are as educators and community members. To ask ourselves, who are we responsible to? What are we responsible for? What kinds of subjects are we becoming through our scholarship? What kind of scholarly spaces are we opening? And frontiers are we traversing? To borrow a term from philosophy, a close reading on FUNDAEC's approach is a call for resubjectivation, a reformation of ourselves as thinkers and as collaborators, so that we may better serve the aspirations of our communities and of higher education itself. To walk this path, to evolve in this way, will take courage and bravery. And I think that's what I admire most about those three people I mentioned before. The next thing I'd like to discuss is the commitment to place, which is central to all that has been described so far, a commitment to Norte del Cauca and to the people of Colombia and to the people of the world in every region in which its programs are operating, a commitment to place. Although this concept of resubjectivation might come from philosophy, I actually mean it in a very place-based sense. The evolution of ourselves as thinkers and collaborators has to take place somewhere. For the founders of FUNDAEC, that was Norte del Cauca. Like many of you, I'm not from Norte del Cauca. But that doesn't mean the insights from them or FUNDAEC's stories or its insights isn't for me and you. Its lessons resonate far beyond Colombia, in part because they do begin somewhere, in a geography close in. I want you all to think about your own places, your territories, your regions, your home communities, and take a picture of it in your mind. I live in West Virginia, in the mountainous region of Appalachia, a place that's shaped by exploitation and misrepresentation and abandonment. People in West Virginia carry the weight of this history while also facing political division, outmigration, health disparities, environmental degradation, racial injustice, and gender inequality. For many young people in Appalachia, they feel a strong push to leave rather than to stay. They believe opportunity lies elsewhere, and external prejudices about Appalachia as backward, hopeless, can begin to creep in. One of our constant conversations among my colleagues in both universities and communities in West Virginia is how we will support a new generation to remain, to contribute, and to transform their home places. These are questions familiar to many of you, and certainly to Gustavo, Haleh, and the founders of FUNDAEC. They were the same questions that shaped the early formation of FUNDAEC in Norte del Cauca. And they were the questions of Farzam Arbab, who arrived in Colombia at the same age that I arrived in West Virginia, 30 years old, asking, what is my role in this place? How do I translate my faith into action? And what responsibilities do I carry? These are the same questions many of us ask as we consider our own paths and professions. And if you haven't asked them yet, I encourage you to do so. What is your commitment to your place, to your territory, or your region? How are you contributing, or how can you contribute to the transformation of your community? How are you evolving your sense of scholarly boundaries with courage, knowing that the conventional ways things are operating can be deeply entrenched, even at progressive universities? In West Virginia, asking these kinds of questions would wake me up in the morning and push me out the door, off campus, into meetings, and they gave me a great sense of purpose. The call to do things differently and with courage led me to countless collaborators from the university, grassroots leaders, and students. I would draw upon what I had learned in the community building process and from the Institute. No greater means for resubjectivation exists in the world than this revolutionary educational system. Become immersed with hundreds of people in efforts to address food insecurity, eliminate water pollution, promote flood preparedness, build food hubs, and much more. The work and relationships grew exponentially, requiring greater institutional coherence and resources to sustain all of it. But all of this needed to be built in place. It needed to be built in Appalachia. In 2019, after about 10 years of work, we established the WVU Center for Resilient Communities. And since then, with a framework and systems in place, we've trained over 150 undergraduates and 25 graduate students in collaborative participatory research, and then have established project partnerships with 40 community organizations, one of which has been FUNDAEC, in advancing the Growing Hope project in Colombia that Haleh was just describing. We're now cultivating a generation of learners and leaders in West Virginia committed to collective inquiry and service. And this spring, we celebrated our 5th anniversary, a modest milestone compared to 50 years of FUNDAEC. The journey has been wild and rewarding. No training wheels, no life jackets, no hand-holding, just the pursuit of excellence, prayer, support from treasured mentors like these folks on stage, dedicated students like some in the audience, guidance from studying the messages of the House of Justice, and inspiration from the founders and current staff of FUNDAEC. I share this to say, the vision and practice of development innovated by FUNDAEC and its commitment to place has profoundly shaped our work in Appalachia. There have been victories and setbacks, but above all, confirmations. And one of those most meaningful confirmations has been the friendship of Haleh and Gustavo, and the chance to share the learning and build partnerships across regions, and the opportunity to work with the next generation who show so much promise. I'd like to end by talking about an oft forgotten element of the work of FUNDAEC. Maybe under-recognized is a better way of putting it. But I think it's one of the most essential elements of FUNDAEC's story. Time and dedication. This year marks its 50th anniversary, which is an extraordinary achievement. But more than enduring, FUNDAEC has constantly evolved. It has grown, innovated, articulated principles, and lived by them. It is not a static institution. It is a living, breathing, adapting, maturing organism that has shared its learning widely, and it is still growing. 50 years is no accident. It is not the result of chance or luck. It reflects sustained commitment from countless individuals who didn't just see potential, they worked daily to realize it. That level of responsibility and perseverance is a true inspiration. It's no wonder that FUNDAEC has had such success. I have never met a more hardworking and focused team. Even before at dinner, Haleh was talking about how there are certain elements of this talk we needed to prepare a little bit more, like very much thinking through how to constantly be at our best. That pursuit of excellence constantly a part of what is in FUNDAEC's DNA. Working with FUNDAEC requires concentration and focus. Yes, there is joy, but it is always grounded in a deep sense of mission and the joy in accomplishing tasks and moving forward step by step. You might expect an organization of 50 years to take a victory lap, or at least at minimum, a well-deserved nap. But FUNDAEC is more engaged now than ever, strengthening internal systems, regenerating agriculture in Norte del Cauca, expanding reforestation projects across the country, innovating teacher training around the world, and partnering with NGOs across the globe. The book was just one piece of this anniversary, and a very small one at that. FUNDAEC also organized 19 regional events across Colombia and has been sharing insights and gatherings in DC, Boston, San Francisco, West Virginia, and now here in Calgary. And at every stop, Haleh, Bita, and Gustavo have posed some questions, often to the audience, but also in small conversations in the hallways afterward. So how are you contributing to the intellectual life of your community? How are you translating your research into education and development? What are you dedicated to? Who in your area will be the next generation of champions? Look, I realize that we may all seek to be modest as we consider how we answer these questions. After all, this is a small group of people, even though this is one of the largest groups of people I've ever spoken to. It is small. We're small. It's a small group. And this group particularly tends to try to be humble and express humility in all we do. We're all learning, right? For certain. But I'm reminded of a conversation recorded in the book where Haleh challenges us to think differently about modesty. She says in the book, quoting Haleh, "Modesty should not be confused with complacency or a lack of ambition. A modest individual can set ambitious goals and strive to achieve significant accomplishments. Humility does not hinder aspiration. Instead, it can coexist with a strong drive to accomplish great things, demonstrating that modesty and aspiration are not mutually exclusive, but can complement each other in the journey toward meaningful success." Haleh then recollects a speech that Dr. Farzam Arbab gave at the graduation of FUNDAEC's first cohort of engineers, including Groza. In it, Farzam expressed his deepest concern, his concern for the well-being of the people of the region of Norte del Cauca. And these are Farzam's words. "One question continues to worry me. What about the well-being of the inhabitants of this region? When will we really see the results of the work of the technicians and the promoters of community well-being who will follow you? I'm sure that many of my friends would tell me that I should not be so ambitious, that humanity's problems are big, and that a small group should not expect spectacular results and should be content with small contributions. After all, there are more than 2 billion people in the world living in extreme poverty, of which 800 million are said to be continually living under conditions of hunger. Clearly, I have to accept this point of view with humility. We should not demand large solutions from a small group of people and a relatively small effort like FUNDAEC. But the question remains, where should we look for the great solutions to humanity's problems? I think it appropriate to ask all of you, particularly the young people here today, the students and the youth and the early career professionals, the same question posed by Farzam. What about the well-being of the inhabitants in your region? When will we really see the results of your work? Where should we look for the great solutions to humanity's problems? I believe that following the example of FUNDAEC's founders and champions, we must rethink our scholarly practices, renew our commitment to the places where we live, and dedicate ourselves to long-term, meaningful work, so that 50 years from now, we too may look back and celebrate transformations unfolding in each of our regions across North America and the world. Now is not the time to be modest, to be too humble. Raise your aspirations, heighten your ambitions, and focus. Be brave, be brave, be brave. Thank you.
So I want to thank our panelists for traveling so far to generously share these insights with us. And I want to close by just drawing your attention to one other aspect of the gift we've been given tonight. You know, Bradley mentioned that Gustavo Correa served with FUNDAEC for 30 years. Because, of course, then his time and energy was called away from FUNDAEC to serve first on the International Teaching Center and then on the Universal House of Justice. And during those same years, Haleh's time and energy was called to serve the Institute for Studies in Global Prosperity. And in that period, we saw the development of this series of seminars for undergraduates and graduates that many people in this room have benefited from. And this is now a global system of education that is founded on many of the same pedagogical principles that were pioneered in Colombia with FUNDAEC's work. This is also part of the gift we have here tonight. So I want to tie the last sort of thread together, which is to point out, of course, the relationship then between everything we've heard tonight and the system of training institutes that Baha'is are now raising up in every region of the planet, with the help of growing ranks of friends and collaborators. The Ruhi curriculum and its pedagogy also emerged within the same milieu as FUNDAEC and embodies the same underlying methodology. This curriculum, we know, fosters the capabilities for cultivating entirely new patterns of community life. And of course, that curriculum culminates in a book on social action and another on discourse, these themes we've been exploring tonight, where it helps us see the application of those methodologies in those contexts. The methodology embedded in these training institutes has proven its ability to empower people from every background on earth to become protagonists in the story of humanity's spiritual journey towards peace, justice, and shared prosperity. These training institutes are also, we have to recognize, strengthening the intellectual life of our Baha'i community by cultivating the same kind of spiritual, intellectual, and practical coherence we've been hearing about tonight. You may not have, everyone in this room had the opportunity firsthand to experience these transformative impacts in your own local settings. But wherever these training institutes have advanced the furthest, they are giving rise to the forms of social action, including complex social and economic development efforts of the kinds we've heard about tonight, which employ these same underlying methodologies. So I want to urge us to be confident in these methods and approaches that are now so clear and evident and available for us to study and learn how to put into practice. Really, our only challenge is to untangle ourselves from the confused priorities and practices of the deeply materialistic societies we're surrounded by and apply these methods to the transformation of the world around us. So thank you once again. And I believe Miriam has some closing, no? Okay. So have a good evening. I believe we're done for the night.